Hello, subscribers and first-time viewers to the Kenny Hack. Today I'm going to be going over how to set up images in the metric system. If you watched my previous full project video, I showed how I set up the images in inches. I do realize most people use metric, so kind of spent some time trying to figure out how to get DPI, which is dots per inch, to line up with the metric system. And here's where the problem is. Here's the image I'm going to be working with today. Right now, LightBurn, this is something LightBurn needs to fix. You can see here they have 254 dots per inch is equal to a 0.100 line interval for metric. They need to get rid of this dot per inch and turn it into lines per millimeter. Hopefully some people in the forums know how to get a hold of LightBurn and can recommend this as a change. This would make a lot of problems a lot easier, because this is where you can get banding issues. I'll show you an example of banding on one of my old projects that kind of was what was giving me a fits for a long time. I could just never get the metric system to line up with dots per inch, even though this was like a 0.1, and you'd think any whole millimeter or even decimal place of size, it should line up perfectly into it, and it doesn't. It's you got to get this 254 DPI to line up with the total dimensions of the image. Otherwise it might lead to some banding issues. So that's what we're going to be going over today. Once again, I don't have any license for this image. It's purely for educational purposes and personal use, just to kind of show you how to do it. So that's what we're going to be like. There's two typical settings you usually see for metric that I think are good. One is 254. That's kind of a good resolution for using on wood. Like wood, just the way it burns, it doesn't seem like going up to the 300 plus resolutions really gains you a lot. Going up to them higher resolutions might help in like the paint removal type of projects. But 254 you can see is equal to a 0.100 line interval. Another good one to use is 318 DPI, and that goes to a 0.080 line interval. It's a nice even number. You're not working with some rounded out decimal places. So those are kind of the two I use if I'm back in metric. So for this purpose, it's going to be on a wood project, so we're going to leave it at 254. Here's my typical settings. If you watch my other videos, I'm running at 9,000 millimeters per minute, right around 40 to 45% power. With the basswood slabs that I use is a pretty good number. This project was prepped all the same way. Put a layer of Kenny Hack solution on there, the aging stain, then whitewashed over that and dried it with a blow dryer so it's immediately ready to go. And that was all covered in the previous video. So this one here, we're just going over how to set it up in metric to make sure everything lines out and you don't get banding issues. So we'll come back over to this image. This is in GIMP. I'm sure most programs work the same way. So how you initially want to do it is get your image, and we want to make this one, it's about a standard 8.5 by 11 aspect ratio. It's a standard piece of paper, and that's what's going to fit on my piece of wood. So you're going to come to image, and this one's already going to be done scaled to the right size, so it's kind of skipping over this, how you'd got it off the internet or from your clients. All these would be different, but you come here to the resolution, and you can either type in 254 or 318, whichever one you want to use. And you can still double these like I showed in the last video. You can go up to 508 or 636. And that will just allow you to scale the image to like a 1/2 inch interval, or every about 13 millimeter interval. And so like if your picture isn't lining up right on like the 11-inch mark, it's 11.5 inches, and you want to get closer to that dimension, double the number. And then when you go back to GIMP, instead of being 6.8 or 636, it'll still be 318. But now you can break the image down into a half section where the 318 will still line up. I'm sure it's kind of confusing what I'm talking about. You'll have to kind of play with it yourself to kind of really understand what I'm talking about. Hopefully I'm making it clear, but I'll kind of show you here. So we're going to go 254. And then, like, I'm normally working in inches, and I know my piece of paper is about an 8.5 by 11. And if I got my laser head running back and forth really fast on the x-axis, and it's slowly moving up the y-axis, the height is the one that's important. It doesn't matter what the width is. That's not going to throw your pixels off and create banding. It's all in the height. So that's the one we got to get to exactly divisible by 254. So I want 11 inches. So you can go to your calculator, type in 11 inches, take that times 254, and that's how many pixels high the image needs to be. It's 2,794. And now it's exactly divisible by 254. So we can come back here, and you can see, like if I know I want that height of 11 inches, and I want it exactly divisible by 254. So I initially put it in inches because I know that's what I want for dimensions. And now I can change it back to pixels. And you can see it's 2,794 pixels high. And it'll automatically scale the width. Like I say, the width, the direction you're burning doesn't matter. It's the direction it's slowly working up. That's what has to be divisible. So if you are burning, like you see in my videos, a lot of times I'm burning in the Y direction. I got my laser head running up and down really fast vertically on the Y and slowly moving across the X. So when I set mine, I'm not worried about the height. I'm worried about the width. And I got to set my width to I'd be setting it to 8.5, and I'll show you how to do that just for the scenario. So once it's in pixels, now I can convert it back to millimeters. Like, you really don't need to do this. This is just so if you're working in metric, you know I need to be about 280 millimeters high. You'll know you're set right. So you can easily convert from millimeters, inches, pixels, however you want to do it so it makes sense to you. But you're ultimately worried about this pixels per inch being divisible by what way you're slowly working up. In this case, it's 2794. But now, if you're like for me, if I like burning in the Y direction, because I got an Ortur 20 watt, and the 20 watt focuses in a little square, and it's kind of shaped like a cat's eye, the focus beam. So I find if I burn in the Y direction, I get a more narrow band of focus than I do in the X direction, and it's slightly more powerful of a focus. It burns about 5% lower power than what I need on burning on the X axis. So that's another reason I like to burn on the Y axis. But so if we convert this back to inches, and for me, I'd be worried about this width. I'd want to get to 8.5 inches. So to get that, we come back here. We got 254 DPI. Take that times 8.5. So we need to be 2159. But as I said, 254 won't divide perfectly into the 1/2 inch. It's going to be like 127. And that it might burn okay like that. I haven't really experimented enough to see if it's only a 1/2 resolution off, if that still avoids doing any banding issues. But I just do it this way because I know it's going to work. So if I want to hit an even 1/2 inch, I'm going to double this number to 508. Because now in LightBurn, when I divide that and when I set it to 254, it can go into the 1/2 decimal. So we'll go back to inches. We'll set the width to 8.5. Now it's going to burn slightly over 11 inches. It's better to overrun a little bit than come up short, kind of on my projects is how I feel. So now it automatically adjusted the height. And since I'm running on the y-axis on this one, now I don't have to worry about that being slightly off 11. I'm worried about the 8.5. And you can see now the width is the 4318 we were looking for. Oops. I'm sorry. Well, it's double that because we want to be able to cut it down in LightBurn. So if I was going to take that right into LightBurn, I just hit scale, and then I'll hit file, export as. I'll keep the same file name, export, replace, export it again. Now, like this image here was set up with the 254 as a native, and it was set up to burn in the X direction. So the height is what we wanted. It was the 279.4 millimeters is what we calculated out in GIMP. So this one would be set to go if I wanted to burn in the X axis. Now we'll import that same one that I just set up to do on the 8.5 inches. I'm sorry if I'm jumping between inches and millimeters. I've just gotten so used to working with inches. It's kind of what I'm used to. So this is still the same image. Like you can see, this is the new one it just brought in. And I'll create a different layer for that one. We'll shut the back one off. So we'd go to 9,000 millimeters per minute. Start off around 42.5% power. Generally, if I'm working at that 9,000 speed, I put on some like 6 millimeters overscan, or about 1/4 inch works pretty good if you're in English or Imperial. And now this one here was set up on the 508 DPI, but I'm still going to set it to 254 DPI in here. That's just going to allow me to stay, and get the pixels to line out to where when it's dividing into that width, it's going to exactly line up with the pixel count. So a little bit of math you kind of got to do with this conversion, just to make sure everything stays lined up and you don't get banding issues. But I've found this method to work quite well. Once you do it a few times and kind of understand what you're doing, it's pretty simple and quick to do. It's not that hard. But like I said, this time, now instead of burning on the 0, I'd either burn on the -90 or the 90-degree scan angle. I like the newsprint. And from here, I'd probably go in, adjust a little bit on the shape properties. Usually kind of bump up the gamma a little bit. Contrast, take it down. Just try a couple standard settings here. -15 contrast, 15 brightness, and then I do about a 50 on all the enhancements. Kind of use that as my starting point. And what you're looking for is to where like it's keeping all this detail up here in the shadows, and it's kind of taking the darkest black back a little bit. There's nothing that's pure black and nothing that's kind of pure white. You kind of bring the extremes back in. You're looking for more mid-tones, just so it doesn't end up overburning or missing some of the really lighter details by not having, pure white. You can't get much any detail in it. So if you leave it a little bit of a shade of gray, the laser will be able to burn in a little bit of color to it, especially on these big solid images where there's color in the whole image. Is kind of how I try to set it. I'm trying to get some of the fur detail in here to stay, trying to keep the clouds in. So that's where I'd be set to burn. And I'll run that project out and show you the results. And we'll go from talk a little bit more about it from there. So here are the results, and it's going to be really hard to see on the camera, but it did still leave a little bit of the subtle cloud texturing up here. There is a little bit of the lighter tones of fur down into here. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And this is on a basswood slab. I get these at Hobby Lobby. I really like basswood. It burns really easy. Still carries some good wood texture. This is the live edge. So it still has all the rough bark on the outside. I really like how that frames photos and gives it more of a natural look, I guess, than just a perfectly square piece cut of plywood. So that's what I like burning on myself, but everybody has their own preference. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea on how to convert to metric. Because like I said, all we're trying to do is get this dots per inch in LightBurn. If LightBurn ever updates this to lines per inch instead of DPI, it'll fix a lot of problems. Because then you'll just go, you could set the native resolution to 20, like 0.1 is 10 lines per millimeter. You could set up the resolution to 20 lines per minute and double it, which would be the same as going 254 to 508. Right now, we're kind of stuck with trying to combine imperial with metric. And hold on. And so this here is an example of banding. Like, if you get back far enough, it's a great looking image. But when you get up really close, you can start seeing all these little darkened lines that are cutting across the image. And that's what I'm calling banding. And that's where the DPI and the metric settings just weren't quite lining up. And I don't know how the computer software interprets that. I'm sure there's somebody who knows a lot more about computer programming than I do that can explain it better. But basically, if the pixels don't exactly line up, the count, it'll just drop off whatever leftover pixels it has to make it line up, and however many it cuts out, it just drops that line and starts shifting the pixels around, so your color just isn't quite lining up. It's always shifting a few pixels off or something to that effect. And really frustrating when you're getting a nice burn going and all of a sudden you see all these bands showing up in your work. At first I thought this was like a problem with plywood. I thought this was maybe when they rolled the plywood out and put the veneer on, that these were roller marks. I thought this was just from rolling the veneer onto the plywood and just the weight of the rollers that press these lines in. But this is banding caused by resolution not lining up. So it took me a while to figure out in metric. That's why I first switched over to inches per minute, just because it's easy to get DPI in inches to line out to whatever you want. But trying to get DPI and metric to line out together, there's just certain DPI settings that naturally work out to an even number. So those are what we went with. But As always, like, share, subscribe, comment below if you got questions. I try to answer everybody I can. Hopefully this helps you get to where you're not dependent on running scripts and plugins from other people, where you can kind of put your own artistic touch into your pieces and set the picture how you want it to look and not how a plugin wants it to look. So that's kind of what I like to do. I kind of like to be able to say this was all my own. I didn't rely on a plugin or a script from somebody else when I don't know what it's doing. So hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next video.